All right, so energy flow is unidirectional. Then we have material flow, like the nutrient flow. And we will see, already we mentioned several times that photosynthesis happens by combining nutrients for driving photosynthesis of CO2 plus H2O to produce C6H12O6. We said that gets remineralized and back into inorganic matter, which is recycled, right? So nutrient flow is cyclic, and detritus or dead remains and waste products are the kind of material that are also recycled back. That is just a form of organic matter, hydrocarbons, for example. So biogeochemical cycles are the chemical parts of this matter that are cycled through the system. We mentioned the keyword before, biological pump. So this is a good schematic to show the biological pump. Okay, so it looks complicated, but it's fairly straightforward. So let's see, we look at the side here on the left. There is photosynthesis, which is being supported by upwelling of nutrient. The nutrients are generated by decomposition and remineralization or regeneration of dissolved nutrients like nitrates, phosphates, iron, silica, and so on, which we mentioned before. So the remineralization can happen in the water column, obviously, because nutrients are maximum just below the surface, as we remember before, below the euphoric zone. But the organic matter that makes it all the way to the bottom of the ocean, which we said can be as small as 1% of the total production or less, is also being constantly decomposed by the microbes that live all the way down at the bottom. So it could be shallow bottom in the coastal oceans, but several kilometers down in the deep ocean, right? So this process of microbes recycling is also a very critical part of the overall carbon cycle that we will see a little bit later on. Okay, so this is one part here where a physical process of moving up nutrients is happening by upwelling. And there is a solubility involved, so as you go deeper below the euphoric zone, temperature decreases, pressure increases, and you remember that solubility of various things goes up as temperature goes down and pressure goes up, mostly for gases, but nonetheless these dissolved nitrates are being moved up physically here by upwelling. So this is called the solubility pump, especially when we talk about carbon dioxide. So carbon dioxide is dissolved in the water. As you remember, carbon dioxide profile also has low CO2 near the surface, where it's being used by photosynthesis and is being mixed with the from the atmosphere, increases with depth, and CO2 dissolves more in the deeper, colder, high pressure water, and that is also being brought up. So if you imagine upwelling, upwelled water is also bringing more CO2. What's happening to the oxygen? If you remember, oxygen is high at the surface and decreases down to the oxygen minimum zone, and then it increases again because of the thermohaline circulation bringing higher oxygen to the deeper water. So when you upwell, you tend to bring waters with less oxygen. So all these things you have to work out in your head, because it's just a matter of taking the circulation and remembering the profiles and see which water is coming up. Less oxygen, more CO2, more nutrients coming up, right? So that's kind of the solubility pump. On the right here we are seeing the surface, sea level with air above, warm water near the surface, typically not mixed up like the polar oceans. So all the way to the polar circle you will have stratification with warmer waters near the surface, right? You have the thermocline, can be very strong in the tropics, not so strong in the mid-latitude temperate oceans. In the polar oceans you may have no thermocline. And then you have cold water that's almost constant temperature below about a kilometer or so, correct? So look at the biology then. Sunlight is coming in. There are producers, which are autotrophic. They can photosynthesize, so they are algae and plants, depending on whether you're in the coastal ocean or open ocean. You can have plants in the coastal ocean. In the open ocean, it's mostly algae, right? So they produce the food and oxygen, and they either are eaten, or they drop dead, or they are consumed and broken into pieces. Either way, you produce detritus, and there are animals, consumers, who are eating them here. They are respiring the hydrocarbon or carbohydrates produced by the photosynthesizers, autotrophs. So they are using oxygen and producing CO2. Okay, that also produces detritus because animals themselves, zooplankton eats phytoplankton, zooplankton will be eaten by small fish by big fish, and so on, which also produce dead and decomposing material, which is detritus. That falls down, and then you have bacteria which are consuming the detritus. So this is food for various organisms down the water column. So could be animals eating bacteria. Bacteria also respire and produce CO2. As we saw the whale buffet at the bottom of the ocean, there are all kinds of worms and fish living way down there that are consuming whatever falls down. So they are also producing CO2 and so on. So essentially, CO2 is fixed by photosynthesis, and the material is going all the way down. A lot of it recycles within the top few hundred meters, but nonetheless whatever falls gets consumed all the way down, and very, very little, as we said, 1% or less, makes it to the bottom. This is called biological pump because it is pumping down carbon in the form of organic matter all the way to the bottom, right? So there is remineralization and solubility pump, which is physically bringing back nutrients by upwelling, for example, or currents and so on. And there is this biological pump which is taking CO2 all the way down to the bottom or down to some depth and being recycled. Okay, so that is what we call biological pump and solubility pump. These are important because, as we said, with global warming, if stratification increases and makes it more difficult to mix nutrients into the euphoric zone and primary production drops, then the biological pump is going to become less effective in taking down carbon to the bottom, which means ocean's ability to pump CO2 into the deep ocean will be weakened, will be reduced. It's called biological pump. It's because it's literally pumping down carbon. So why are we always talking about carbon? Because we are producing CO2 by burning fossil fuels, and we are always worried about where all this CO2 is going and where can it continue to go, because the ocean is so deep and can put away carbon for a long time, as opposed to, let's say, soil, which is not that deep. It can keep carbon, but the residence time of the carbon in the ocean can be much, much, much longer than the residence time of carbon in the soil. Soil also has a lot more perturbation because there are always animals, humans doing something, land use, land change, right? So that's the basic concept of biological pump and solubility pump. When we warm the ocean and change the circulation and change temperature, we are also changing the solubility pump. So the carbon cycle basically worries about what's happening to the carbon at the air-sea interface, how much is going in, how much is coming out, and with biology, how much is going down and how much that ability to take carbon down by biology is being changed because of human activities, ocean warming, etc. Okay, it's a good concept. Make sure you understand it. It's very simple, but you should just know the terms and what we mean by each of them.